Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's less than a third of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on several acres out in the country.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want others to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where, and why. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Carol.
Hello, Dee. How are you this week?
I am just great.
Good. I am too, although we're heading into a hot week.
We just stay in a hot week until about September, although this year has been the best weather I can remember in Oklahoma for many years. And the garden still looks good. I did a lot of weeding this week, as did you.
Yes.
And a lot of deadheading. I deadheaded all my roses. And I know it's too late because you're not really supposed to at the end of August. But you know what? I want to see those September flowers because in August this year, all the flowers were eaten by grasshoppers.
Boo.
I'm really tired of grasshoppers. And I also deadheaded all of my Shasta daisies, and that was a huge job.
It is.
And exciting news, the monarchs are on the move. I've seen a lot of monarchs in my garden, and I have a whole bunch of them in a cage off to my right.
Nice.
I shouldn't say I have the butterflies. I have the caterpillars. I bring them in as eggs, and then in fact, my newsletter that's getting ready to come out is going to talk all about that.
Oh, that sounds nice. We should provide a link to your newsletter sign up in case people haven't signed up for it.
Okay, I'll be glad to do that.
How about the vegetable garden?
The vegetable garden's doing great. Yesterday, I harvested some big Jim peppers, which are a chili type pepper, but they're not hot. So if somebody wants to try one, they get nice and big, and they're big enough to stuff them. And since I've been eating keto with Bill, low carb, we stuffed them with cream cheese and cheddar cheese, put in some seasoning, and then topped them with some bacon that I chopped up. And that's way easier than making jalapeno poppers because you don't have to wrap each one, and it's a little less bacon, a little less fat, They're good.
That actually sounds pretty good. So out in my vegetable garden, I've been picking tomatoes, and my tomato plants, I'm going to say, don't look great right now. I'm not going to get a bunch more. Squash is still going pretty good. Seen some squash bugs, though, so they're not lasting very long. Lots of peppers coming on. I'm still picking green beans from my favorite provider. The other green bean plants I decided to just leave but not pick because they are fixing nitrogen in the soil, and then I'm probably just going to work those in here in a little bit.
Didn't you also pick some corn?
I did. I pulled an ear off my glass gem corn. And when you pull down those husks, you never know what color it's going to be.
Right.
It was all yellow.
Well, that's not what we want in glass gem corn. I've grown it too, and you want it to be all purple and blue and orange and pink and yellow.
I know. And I was just like, there was absolutely no color but yellow. So I'm thinking, uh-oh. Did I know I planted something that said it was glass gem corn, but I'm like,
yeah.
Oh. And it doesn't usually turn later. It starts out those colors, the kernels.
Right. I think the colors intensify as it dries, but it definitely starts out those colors. That is going to be some yellow corn. I wonder if it's sweet. If you taste it, and it's sweet, and it's not a dent corn or a popcorn, you'll know that you got a different corn. What a bummer.
That would be a huge bummer.
Well, let's hope that's not the case. And I saw a picture of your zinnias. I don't remember where you put it. I think you put it on your blog, right? Yeah.
Yes, the zinnias are amazing. They're the best zinnias I've ever grown.
What kind are they?
There's all kinds in there. I got some from Burpee, some from Renee's Garden Seeds, some from Botanical Interest, and I just kind of go down and just plant them all up.
Yeah. Well, my zinnias have been great, except for they had some mildew, but I also realized that some of my watering wasn't working with my soaker hoses, so we fixed that, and I deadheaded all of my zinnias, and they look pretty good.
Good. The other thing is I pulled out so many weeds last week, it's almost embarrassing, but let's go on.
It was embarrassing here too. So people, if you have weeds, don't feel bad. Just go pull them out. Because I bet you have a bunch of grass in your gardens. I know I did.
I did. Oh my gosh. It was
Crabgrass.
embarrassing.
So you can read the quote?
This garden is made of love and details. Look for the details. By Rachel Lambert Mellon, who goes by the name Bunny Mellon.
Right. She went by Bunny, which Bunny Mellon sounds really funny. But Bunny Mellon was a famous garden designer.
She was, and she is in the news, and people are discovering about her because they have redone the White House Rose Garden, which is the most famous garden that she designed.
It is.
I think it's really important in any garden. Details do sometimes matter, and sometimes only the gardener can understand the details, and some of those are, in my mind, the detail of the names of the flowers.
Right, specifically the roses, the new roses in the garden. We looked them up. The roses in the restored White House garden, which we should really say that it was kind of John F. Kennedy's idea to put the garden in there, and then his wife ran with it. And Jacqueline Kennedy, who later became Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, was best friends with Bunny. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I thought John F. Kennedy was a family friend. I don't know. Anyway, Bunny ran with the Kennedys.
Well, according to what I read in 2 or 3 articles yesterday, Bunny and she were best friends at the time. So they asked her to do it. And it's in a book, All the President's Gardens, which we've both read. And so the Rose Garden is about 1,700 square feet. And it sits outside the Oval Office. And it is the one that almost all of the press briefings are done in.
Right. And what people don't realize is the constraints of that garden. It has to hold upwards of 1,000 people at any one time. Obviously less with social distancing now, but it's got some constraints.
It does. And since it was created in 1962, the year of my birth, I can tell you it was 58 years old because I turned 58 in a week and a half. So it's only 1,700 square feet. It was first planted not by Jacqueline Kennedy, but actually by Lady Ellen Wilson. And then it was redesigned and overseen by First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. So when they decided to redo it, they hired a major landscape architecture firm whose name I cannot pronounce, and I meant to go look it up, and I forgot to do it last night. I got interrupted, but very famous. And they chose the roses specifically. And the reason I know they chose the roses specifically is because I'm working on the Blessed Stanley Rother Shrine in Oklahoma City, and I'm on the landscape committee there. And everything we do with the landscape architect is done very specifically and very purposefully. So it wasn't just one person chose the roses. But we know now, because it's been introduced, that John F. Kennedy is one of the roses, which makes perfect sense.
Right. And that one was introduced in 1965.
Right.
And has a green bud that opens to a white rose. And it's a hybrid tea rose and very fragrant. Probably not grown a lot anymore because it is a hybrid tea.
Right. All of these are hybrid teas, all 3 of the main roses. And that was I thought it was kind of a surprise. I grew John F. Kennedy in the past, and I can tell you it's not really highly disease resistant. However, the second rose is Pope John Paul II, and it was introduced in 2013. And it is disease resistant because all rose hybridizers now worry a lot about disease resistance because of black spot and other problems. And the Washington, D.C. is very, very humid. So they're going to have some black spot. Why do you think that Pope John Paul II was chosen?
You tell me why you think it was chosen.
Well, I think it was chosen because the First Lady, Melania Trump, is a very devout Catholic. And I think it was suggested to her as a really good rose to put with John F. Kennedy because they're both white roses. And I think and they both are highly scented. It's a strong citrus fragrance. And it makes a very full shrub. So it will hopefully be a good rose to balance out the John F. Kennedy rose, and they will look similar yet different when the garden's grown in. And then you tell about the last rose.
Well, the last rose is the peace rose, which is probably, if you ask people if they know the name of a hybrid tea rose and they've been anywhere near gardening, they'll say peace, which was a rose that it's not very disease resistant, but it was developed right at the end of World War II.
No, at the beginning.
At the beginning.
It was at the beginning of World War II because Francis Mellon, he actually was working on it, knew it was a good rose, and he was afraid that the Germans were going to invade France, which they did. And so he sent some plant materials, in other words, some cuttings to the United States, to the Conard Pyle Company, which is now part of Star Roses.
Ah, very interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. So I think almost anyone who's ever grown roses has grown peace. And I love the peace rose. It is a really highly fragrant rose. It's beautiful. It's yellow and pink and peach, and it makes great big, huge blooms. Again, it's an older rose, so it doesn't have the disease resistance of some other roses, but it is considered a very influential rose. And also, I think the fact, like peace, it represents peace in the world because it was the Americans who named it.
Ah, I see. Yes. And you say that it was declared the only winner of the All-America Rose Selections in 1946 on the same day that Japan surrendered, effectively ending the World War II.
Right. And that's directly from Star Roses from their website.
And you found a really cool video about the peace rose on YouTube, which we are going to link to.
Yeah, it kind of makes me want to grow it again, but it's too humid here and I don't spray. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if they're going to spray or I don't know. But you know what? They have really good professional gardeners there. We should also, well, we'll talk about that at the end. But that's the 3 roses that were chosen. And then from the videos I looked at, they also chose some salvias that looked to be white, kind of a white flowering sage. They didn't say what it was. So,
because if you're going to have the John F. Kennedy and the peace rose, they are going to get leggy. You got to have something under them to kind of hide their legs, hide those bare stems.
They're going to get black spot and they're going to drop some leaves, even if you spray them. So, I assume that they are not going to spray anything for insects. They'll just do some herbicides. Herbicide is wrong. It would be fungicide. We don't want to spray a herbicide on them because it'll kill them.
Yeah. We're crazy. All right, let's do our next quote and move on to vegetables. You want to do this one?
I will, because it's one of my favorite garden personalities. If kids grow kale, kids eat kale. If they grow tomatoes, they eat tomatoes. But when none of this is presented to them, if they're not shown how food affects the mind and the body, they blindly eat whatever you put in front of them. That's by Ron Finley. And Ron Finley just won Garden Com's, is it a fellow?
No, he became an honorary member of Garden Com because...
Honorary member, yeah.
But he's in Los Angeles and he has really taught, in the urban environment, taught people how to grow vegetables where they didn't think they could. He just started planting them in his front garden. And he's got an amazing story about how he's literally transformed neighborhoods with vegetable gardens. And he also now has a master class on growing vegetables. And he also has a great TED Talk. And we should link to his TED Talk and his master class because there's just so much you can learn from this guy about community gardening and growing vegetables.
And about food deserts and how we can change that.
Right. And it does remind me of the story of when my niece was teaching. And she taught in a school where I don't know what very high percentage of the kids were getting free lunches. But she said she would walk around the lunchroom eating a carrot or eating an apple because these kids literally had seen nobody eat a carrot or an apple or a stick of celery.
Can you imagine?
And so she wanted them to see that these vegetables are good for eating.
Yeah, because carrots are delicious.
They are.
And I would hate to not have a world where I had not eaten carrots. But you know what? If your family is not able to buy food. If there are no grocery stores in your part of the city, that's why Ron Finley started doing that, is that he was like, you know what, we've got to change this. And so he became this huge community organizer, and he grows things and he teaches kids, and I just admire him so much.
So I picked that. I was actually looking for a quote about kale, and Ron Finley came
I know
up.
that. That's cool.
And we wanted to talk about this vegetable called kalettes, which
Autumn Star Kalettes from John Sheeper's Kitchen Garden Seeds.
I have seen these grown. So they crossed kale and Brussels sprouts, and you call it an exciting new cross. And I'm not a...
No, I didn't. No. I didn't say it was an exciting new cross. That's from the catalog.
Okay.
The catalog said it was an exciting new cross. To me, they're just little kale plants on a Brussels sprout stem.
Right. So instead of on the Brussels sprout, as it grows up in the stem and the leaf axils, you'll have what I always refer to as miniature cabbages.
Right.
So on the kalettes, you will have miniature leaves, like kale leaves, in the leaf axils.
I mean, it might be kind of fun as an oddity to grow it, you know, but here, we would have to kind of do it. I think I would have to start seeds inside in July or August. Same thing with cabbage and Brussels sprouts. And then I would have to transplant them out in September to make it work.
Yes. And I would probably have to do something similar here, plant them out at the end of August. And I actually saw them when I was on a garden tour at the beginning of June one year, and she had the kalettes growing. And so if you go to a garden center that just happens to have some plants, you could get them in the early spring too, or you could grow them yourself. I don't know. I'm just kind of stuck by the idea of, I'm not a big fan of Brussels sprouts. I'm not a big fan of kale. I'm not a big fan of putting them together. But go for it. If this is your vegetable, you need to try this. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think if you live in a cool climate, or if you want to grow stuff in the fall, and hopefully by then your caterpillars for the, all the cabbage moths will be starting to wind down, because the problem we run into in Oklahoma is growing really pretty cabbage. There's two problems in the spring: the caterpillars,
yep,
and the heat.
Yep.
And we never know what kind of spring we're going to have. And you guys have a longer spring. So I'm going to say, if you're going to grow them in Oklahoma, you probably want to grow them in the fall so that you actually get some.
That's true. And you might have to provide some cover later from frost, and you'll probably get some. Knock yourself out, Dee. Let me know how that goes for you.
I am not growing these. I'm not growing these. I just thought it was fun because I'd never heard of it before. I thought it was a veggie we hadn't done.
Yeah, I've heard of them. So speaking of things, oddities
never heard
or whatever. Of? Yeah. So in the news a couple of weeks ago was about all these people that got these weird packets of seeds from China, and they would be labeled like jewelry or something like that.
Yeah, just unsolicited seeds from China.
Well, I know two people who got those seeds.
That is crazy. I don't know anybody who got those seeds.
And the one person, they mailed them to the state chemist office to have them analyzed. The other person said, well, I thought they were seeds I ordered, so I planted them. And she thinks it's just a giant gourd out there, which is intermixed with pumpkins that she planted, and it's a big mess. And so I said, well, whatever comes out of that pumpkin patch, gourd patch, or whatever, you need to put it all in the trash at the end of the season and let it go to the incinerator.
Yeah,
but it does bring up our. I asked them both. I said, "Why are you getting seeds from Amazon in the first place? What made you think to buy?" The one person said, "I didn't order seeds." That was the tip off. The other person said, "Well, I did order seeds from Amazon. I thought these were them." I'm like, oh my God! Never buy seeds from Amazon. Buy them from the reputable seed sources.
Yeah.
Botanical Interest, Burpee, Renee's Garden Seeds, John Sheeper's, Pine Tree Garden Seeds, Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. So many good reputable companies.
Right. Which are in the United States and a lot of times gather their seeds from in parts of North America. So you're less likely to come with something weird.
Yeah.
And something that the Secretary of Interior wants to come destroy in your garden.
Exactly.
I will say this. I was looking for African blue basil all spring long and could not find it, even early. And I know about it because of our friend Gail Eichelberger. She said, hey, this is a great pollinator plant, and it doesn't have seeds. It doesn't have viable seeds, so you have to buy a plant. Anyway, long story short, I found it on Etsy, but before I bought the plants, I went and looked at what nursery it was, and it was a reputable nursery called Lazy Ox Farm. And I have also bought houseplants on Etsy, because there are various reputable nurseries who happen to sell their stuff on Etsy. So just be careful. And if you're going to buy seeds on Etsy, you might want to buy from our friend
Nan Andra, who regularly collects open pollinated seed varieties from her garden, especially a lot of unusual flowers. But she has right there on her Etsy site that she is registered with the Pennsylvania State Department of Agriculture. And so you want to look for that person who has taken the extra step to get themselves registered.
Right.
And then you have a reliable source. But for heaven's sakes, if a package arrives from China, labeled earrings or whatever, don't plant those seeds.
Yeah, don't plant the seeds. Because apparently so far they've just been kind of weird things, and we aren't even sure what the point of them were, but they don't want them because they could be invasive plants. That's one of the things that they worry about.
They could.
So we have another quote because we're going to move on to our bookshelf.
Part of creating is understanding that there is always more to do. Nothing is ever completely finished. And that is once again by Rachel Lambert Mellon, a.k.a. Bunny Mellon.
Yes, Bunny Mellon. And so the books, we have several books because Bunny Mellon is definitely in the news right now. There's The Gardens of Bunny Mellon, which is by Linda Jane Holden and photographed by Roger Foley. You and I judged this book.
Last year, yes.
Last year, and it is a beautiful coffee table book of her gardens, which still exist, and there are people in the process of trying to restore those gardens.
Right.
So, and it's not easy to do because gardeners some gardeners keep track of everything they do, but a lot of gardeners don't. And so it's, just because you have a design doesn't mean you don't change things over your lifetime. And Bunny didn't die until like 2014.
She was 103 years old.
Yeah, she was really old. And I think she lived in her house up till the very end. And then, is there anything else you wanted to say about that book?
Nope. I go on to the next book, which is Bunny Mellon, The Life of an American-Style Legend by Merrill Gordon. This book is, and I have this, I think it got sent to me
I don't have that one.
I think I got it as a review book. And this sucker, it's like 500 pages. And it's like...
Is it all about, did she do interior design too?
Yeah, I'll say she was a stylist. And she was sort of a Martha Stewart before Martha Stewart.
Right.
And she set this, but not the cooking part. It's interesting.
She did beautiful things. Okay, and so that takes us on to a book that I don't have, but I've thought about getting. Garden Secrets of Bunny Mellon, which is also by Linda J. Holden, Thomas Lloyd, and Brian Huffman. And there's some discussion about her garden and how hard it is to figure out where all her plants are and what was actually there.
Right.
All of that kind of thing. And then we have another one that you and I both read.
All the President's Gardens, Madison's Cabbages to Kennedy's Roses, How the White House Grounds Have Grown with America by Marta McDowell.
And so you said in that book, because I didn't go back and read it again, but you said in that book that Bunny was actually a friend of John F. Kennedy's, according to Marta. That's interesting because they're calling them Kennedy's Roses instead of Jacqueline Kennedy's Roses. And everybody really associates that garden with Jackie Kennedy. And I think it's because she did a big White House tour, and you can actually find how she rehabbed the whole White House. She did a bunch of video of it, and it's up on YouTube. You can be found. It can be found.
Right. And Marta McDowell says in her book that it was John F. Kennedy who would look out from the office and the grass was just horrendous, and he really wanted to kind of spruce things up. So,
well, I think when they moved in, the whole White House was a mess, right? And they spent a lot of money fixing it up, as did Nancy Reagan when the Reagans moved in.
So in the chapter that I think it's John F. Kennedy's friend, she refers to Kennedy turned to family friend Rachel Lambert Mellon. So it could have been a friend of both of those, but a friend of the family, obviously a friend of the Kennedys. And so if you are interested in the White House gardens, we once again really recommend All the President's Gardens by Marta McDowell. I mean, she's a historian, garden historian, par excellence. Always, when Marta comes out with a book, you just buy it. That's the end of the story.
Yeah, because Marta's just super smart and does a great job researching. She's a great researcher. I will say this, every president and first lady have changed some aspect of the White House landscape.
Right.
They've either planted, trees for, like, one of the problems with the White House garden before it was rehabbed was that the Johnsons planted a giant willow oak, and it's not 80 feet tall. And so it shades a good portion of the garden. So the crab apples had to be pulled out. So that brings us to our dirt. About how gardens have to be renovated.
Yes, and my garden is relatively young, 23 years old, but I mean, I'm constantly looking at areas and saying, this needs to be redone. And you said your garden is 32 years old?
Yeah, portions of my garden are 32 years old. And sometimes you just try things and they don't work. That's, like right now I'm getting ready to redo all of my raised beds that my cutting flowers are in because I did them wrong, and I'll be the first to admit I did them wrong. They're too big and too long and too deep. So I like them that deep, though, even though they don't have to be that deep. I like them that deep because I can sit on the edge, because I'm all about not having to get down in the garden because I have too much other garden that has to be that way. So the White House Rose Garden, as we said, is 58 years old, and I can restore and remove plantings in my own garden and change things up. But unfortunately, after 58 years, both Bunny Mellon and Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis passed. And so this was something that they wanted to do. And there's a really good article in the Washington Post, which we're going to link to. And there was a lot of drama on social media because Melania Trump made some changes.
Right.
But if you actually read this article in the Washington Post, you understand why the garden had to be renovated. And as a gardener, I will say this to all the people who are not gardeners out there. All gardens look really new and unfinished when they're brand new because plants have to grow into the space. And nobody likes change, I guess. But, the crab apples, talk about the crab apples.
Well, the crabapple trees, in the article, it points out that when Bunny was still alive, when the Reagans were in the White House, they asked Bunny what they should do about the crab apples because they were kind of crowded and stuff. And she said they had to remove some of them. And so I think
they didn't.
They didn't remove them. So now they have removed them. They're replanting them on other areas of the property because of their historic significance. The other changes they made to this garden is they made it handicap accessible, so it's ADA compliant. They had drainage problems that they had to fix. We already talked about the willow.
They had to replace the lawn every year.
Right.
Because the drainage was so bad. So they put in all these limestone walks that will help with the drainage, permeable paving.
Yes. And we talked about the willow tree, and that's added shade. And even in my garden, areas that used to be sunny are now shaded. And so the plants that were in the sun are not doing as well. So I need to shift things around sometimes and get some more shade plants. I've been dying to have shade, so I'm happy about it.
That's good.
Plus this garden, I read, they had to add some additional utilities so they could handle audio visuals and
the press
sound and the press. They have to be able to accommodate up to 1,000 people in this space.
And that's not easy because it's not a very big space. And they put almost all of the communications equipment underground. So they ran all these cables to make it easier for the press, for reporters to come in and plug in their equipment. Because think about it, one of the reasons they fixed the garden in the first place in 1962 is that Kennedy was one of the first presidents to really utilize TV.
Right.
And so he wanted to be able to go out there. Now think about how many changes there have been in communication in the last 58 years.
Oh, yeah.
So many. And so their hope is it is sad that they had to move the crab apples because they represented change within the garden and the seasons, but they don't have enough sun. And so the crab apples made things even shadier, and the plant roots were the roots of the trees were a problem. So I'm really glad that they moved the trees and that they're going to replant them. And I can tell you from having worked on the shrine, when we move trees, and also from the Myriad Gardens, from seeing how they did it, they put them in what's called a tree bank, and they hold them there. And we're actually doing that at the shrine. We're designating an area that's going to eventually be soccer fields, if it all works out, outside of the shrine. But right now, it's going to hold saplings so that when we have a tree die, we can replace it.
Right.
And so that we can buy smaller trees, grow them on while they're building the church. So I know that they're doing similar things on this, because one of the best things I've gotten to do is work with this group of landscape architects. And you just realize that there's so much meaning, and that you're trying so hard to make things, look good.
Right. And that's the thing. So we talked about the garden has to have meaning. And so it has meaning. It has to be utilitarian. And so they've made it a better space. I mean, I can imagine the cables that ran all over the grass when they've had to do something to try to get things. So that's all underground. And it has to look good in all seasons, because they could, as long as the weather's good, they could be out in this garden. And so a lot of challenges. And then, you want to be respectful to what Bunny Mellon did. And so I think that they've done a fabulous job. I'm pleased.
And according to that article that we both read, I read several, but the one in the Washington Post, he said that Mrs. Trump is actually a huge fan of Mrs. Kennedy Onassis. And so a lot was done to try to, help her out. I will say this is kind of funny. So there's a daylily. You asked me if I would put John Paul II rose in my garden. Well, I already have John Paul II clematis in my garden, and I don't have a place for a hybrid tea rose that's white. But on top of that, I think they could I have a beautiful daylily, and it's gorgeous, and it's Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. So personally, I would like to see some daylilies put in at the White House that represent, there's one that's also called Eleanor Roosevelt, and I have both of those in my garden.
What color are they?
So the color of both of them is a lovely soft yellow, and one has kind of a pink ruffle, and the other one has, kind of the color of the peace rose. That's what I would say they look like. I'm not saying put them in the rose garden. I'm just saying plant them somewhere on the property, because one of my big things is, okay, so we have a John F. Kennedy rose, but I would like the first ladies to be remembered.
Yeah. So Dee, I
That's
want you to design a first lady garden full of first lady flowers.
Well, I'll just get right on that, Carol, because I don't have anything else to do.
Well, with that, why don't we wrap up? Because you've got a lot of work to do now with that garden design I just tasked you with.
Yeah.
So we want to thank everyone for listening to The Garden Angelist. If you like our podcast, please tell your friends about us.
And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us to get noticed by others. Please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode.
Yes, and be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye.